Well, the future of Minnesota's most famous river is in danger. That's according to a new report that ranked the Mississippi among the most endangered in the country.
Deep in the heart of America, a discovery beneath the waters of the mighty Mississippi River has sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Cracks, deep, irregular fissures, have been found stretching along key segments of the Mississippi riverbed, prompting geologists to issue a rare and chilling red alert. The urgency behind this announcement is not rooted in speculation or cautionary forecasting. It comes from hard data, field observation, and a troubling convergence of geological factors that could alter not just the river's trajectory, but the stability of the entire surrounding region. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The Mississippi River is more than a body of water. It is an artery of commerce, a source of drinking water for millions, a cradle of biodiversity, and a historical force that has shaped both landscapes and civilizations. For centuries, it has carved its way through the American heartland, shifting and evolving through floods, droughts, and human intervention. But this time, nature seems to be turning on a more unpredictable and potentially catastrophic path. The discovery of cracks in its bed is not merely a matter of curiosity. It's a signal that something below the surface, something fundamental, is beginning to unravel. Cracks in a riverbed, especially one of this magnitude, are not common and certainly not trivial. These fractures indicate a breakdown in the stability of the geological structures that support the river's flow. What makes this situation especially perilous is that these cracks are not superficial. Preliminary imaging and geological surveys have revealed that the fissures extend dozens of feet below the surface, slicing through layers of sediment and bedrock alike. They vary in size and shape. Some are narrow slits, others yawning gaps several meters wide, but all share a sinister depth and a pattern that points to underlying tectonic stress. This stress does not arise in isolation. Geologists believe the cracking could be tied to subtle shifts in the New Madrid seismic zone, a fault system that lurks beneath the Mississippi Valley. While less notorious than California's San Andreas Fault, the New Madrid zone is no less dangerous. In the early 1800s, it was responsible for a series of powerful earthquakes that caused the Mississippi River to flow backward temporarily. Since then, it has been largely quiet. But the silence is misleading. Geological time moves slowly, and pressure can build quietly for centuries before releasing in an instant. The appearance of cracks may be the first visual cue that such a release is becoming more likely. Beyond tectonics, there's another layer of concern: the dramatic and prolonged changes in river flow caused by climate fluctuations and human activities. In recent years, the Mississippi River has experienced historically low water levels due to extended droughts, punctuated by flash floods during heavy rain seasons. This oscillating pattern has put unprecedented strain on the riverbed. When water levels drop too low, sediment that typically remains submerged becomes exposed, dries, and cracks. Add to this the cumulative impact of heavy barge traffic, dredging operations, and the construction of levees and dams, and the river's natural equilibrium is thrown into chaos. These factors don't just contribute to erosion, they act like chisels and wedges, helping to pry open cracks in the weakened terrain. The scale and implications of the discovered cracks are deeply troubling. Should these fissures expand, they could compromise the very channel of the Mississippi. In extreme scenarios, parts of the river might even begin to reroute. Such a shift would be more than a hydrological event. It would upend ecosystems, displace communities, and disrupt a staggering volume of commerce. Every day, thousands of barges navigate the Mississippi River, transporting everything from grain and coal to petroleum and steel. If the river's course were to change, or if segments of the bed collapsed, it could sever these vital supply chains with little warning. Agricultural interests, too, hang in the balance. The Mississippi River Basin supports a vast swath of America's farmland, much of which relies on the river for irrigation. The cracks themselves might not pose an immediate threat to water access, but if they lead to sudden drainage shifts, reduced flow, or contamination from subsurface materials, the consequences for crop production could be disastrous. Entire growing seasons could be lost. Soil fertility could be compromised by salinization or sediment changes, and as access to fresh water becomes increasingly vital in an era of climatic uncertainty, any disruption to a source as central as the Mississippi would echo through every tier of the food supply chain. Another pressing concern is infrastructure. The Mississippi River is flanked by dozens of bridges, pipelines, levees, and ports, all of which depend on a certain geological consistency beneath them. Cracks in the riverbed suggest that such consistency can no longer be taken for granted. If the fissures grow, or if they are signs of a larger instability, they could threaten the integrity of critical transportation and utility structures. The risk isn't merely hypothetical. Imagine a scenario where a bridge's foundation is compromised overnight by a sudden shift in the riverbed. The result would not only be an engineering failure, but a human tragedy. Emergency preparedness agencies are already mobilizing. The red alert status is not issued lightly. It reflects the fact that the geological situation has moved beyond background noise into the realm of active concern. Teams of seismologists, hydrologists, and structural engineers are being dispatched to affected regions to monitor changes in real time. A network of sensors is being expanded to track micro movements beneath the riverbed. These steps, though vital, are also reactive. The scale of the river and the uncertainty of what lies beneath means that even the most comprehensive monitoring system can only offer limited foresight. Public anxiety is growing as word spreads. For residents of towns and cities along the Mississippi, places like Memphis, Baton Rouge, and St. Louis, the river is a part of daily life, both a neighbor and a lifeline. But with news of the red alert, that relationship is now shadowed by fear. People are beginning to ask unsettling questions. Should they evacuate? Is their water supply safe? What would happen if the river's course shifted overnight? While officials are cautioning against panic, they are also not offering easy reassurances. The situation is too complex, too unprecedented to allow for simple answers. Beneath the scientific inquiry lies a broader question about human interaction with nature. For centuries, we have bent rivers to our will, channeling them, damming them, controlling their floods with concrete and steel. But the cracks in the Mississippi riverbed may represent nature's counter-response. They are reminders that beneath the layers of regulation and engineering lies a dynamic earth, one that remembers every stress and eventually answers back. In this case, the response might come not as a sudden quake, but as a slow, unrelenting transformation. Cracks growing into chasms, flows shifting course, and systems we took for granted starting to fracture. There's also a biological dimension to consider. The Mississippi River is home to an astonishing range of life. Fish species, migratory birds, amphibians, and aquatic plants. Cracks in the riverbed could disrupt spawning grounds, alter water temperatures, and create pockets of stagnant water where previously there were healthy currents. The ecological balance, finely tuned over millennia, could be shattered by shifts in water flow, or the intrusion of pollutants from newly exposed layers of Earth, affecting both wildlife and human communities downstream. As geologists race to understand the full scope of the fractures, attention is also turning to predictive modeling. Computer simulations are being used to anticipate how the cracks might evolve under different scenarios. Further drought, heavy rainfall, seismic activity, or continued commercial use? The outcomes vary widely, from slow, manageable degradation to rapid collapse of key segments of the riverbed. What's consistent, however, is the message. The system is under strain, and that strain is nearing a critical threshold. One aspect that scientists are watching closely is the interplay between these cracks and groundwater systems. In many areas, the Mississippi overlays vast aquifers that provide water to millions. Cracks in the riverbed could allow river water to drain more rapidly into these subterranean reservoirs, or, conversely, allow pollutants from underground to seep into the river itself. This exchange could trigger a cascade of chemical and biological changes, many of which are poorly understood. In worst-case scenarios, the balance between surface water and groundwater could be permanently altered with ripple effects for decades to come. Meanwhile, engineers and planners are grappling with difficult choices. Should commercial river traffic be halted or rerouted? Should bridges and levees be reinforced preemptively, even at tremendous cost? These are not just technical questions, they are ethical and economic dilemmas with no easy answers. Delay may save money in the short term, but expose entire regions to catastrophic risk. Acting too quickly might divert resources from other urgent needs. Yet as the cracks grow and the red alert status remains in place, the window for indecision narrows. This moment is also forcing a reckoning with how disaster preparedness is handled in the United States. For all its wealth and scientific prowess, the country often struggles to invest in proactive infrastructure upgrades. The Mississippi River cracks could become a test case for whether the system can adapt in time, or whether it will once again wait until disaster has already struck to respond. The warning signs are clear, the data is present, and the scientific consensus is firm. What remains is the will to act. As attention focuses on this unfolding situation, the Mississippi River is no longer just a landscape feature or a transportation corridor. It has become a symbol, a fault line in more ways than one. It reflects the tensions between civilization and geology, between short-term needs and long-term stability. The cracks in its bed are literal, yes, but also metaphorical. They represent the breaks in our understanding of how secure the natural systems we rely on really are. No one knows exactly what the coming weeks and months will bring. The story of the Mississippi River and its hidden fractures is still being written, etched in layers of sediment and stone, traced in shifting currents and quiet tremors beneath the surface. But one truth is already clear. Something fundamental is changing beneath America's most iconic river. The ground is not as solid as it once seemed. And now, with the red alert sounding, the world must decide how to respond before the cracks grow wider and the Mississippi writes a new and potentially devastating chapter in its history. While the immediate attention has been drawn to the geological and infrastructural stakes posed by the cracks in the Mississippi riverbed, there are deeper scientific and environmental complexities unfolding beneath the surface, dimensions that reveal how interconnected and fragile this system truly is. These fissures are not merely rips in sedimentary rock, they represent a disruption in the intricate ancient choreography of hydrology, geology, and climate. And while the human eye sees only the waterline, beneath it, Earth's crust is revealing signs of stress that could unravel much more than we presently understand. One critical area of exploration now underway is how the discovered fractures may affect the subsurface dynamics of sediment transport and river morphology. The Mississippi River has long been a sediment-rich system, carrying thousands of tons of silt, clay, and organic material downstream each day. These sediments build deltas, replenish floodplains, and provide ecological balance. However, when cracks disturb the even flow of the riverbed, they also redirect sediment movement, sometimes trapping it in unexpected areas or funneling it into depressions. Over time, this uneven sediment distribution could cause sections of the riverbed to rise unnaturally, creating shoals and blockages, or conversely, deepen in places, forming sink-like features that can generate turbulence and erosion hotspots. These micro-changes might seem insignificant individually, but collectively they possess the power to reshape the very path of the river. Unlike a static system, a river adapts constantly to changes in flow, temperature, and material load. Introducing stress fractures into this delicate system initiates a feedback loop. A deepened fissure can capture more water and sediment, eroding its edges further and deepening with time, potentially transforming into a subchannel. Should this occur across a wide enough stretch, the Mississippi could begin to fracture into braided channels, multiple smaller paths rather than one main stem. This shift would not only challenge navigation, but also fundamentally alter regional hydrology. From a hydrogeological perspective, the fractures pose serious concerns about sub-river pressure systems. Beneath the Mississippi lies a web of confined and unconfined aquifers, some shallow, some deep, and these aquifers interact with the river through natural seepage zones. The appearance of cracks creates new conduits between the river and these subsurface water bodies, breaching previously stable boundaries. The consequences of this could manifest in two ways. First, the river could begin draining more rapidly into underground aquifers, dropping water levels faster during dry periods. Second, water from aquifers, often warmer, mineral-rich, and sometimes contaminated, could backflow into the river, altering its chemical composition. The water chemistry angle is especially troubling. Aquifers in the region have varying levels of dissolved minerals like arsenic, manganese, and iron, depending on their depth and geological setting. If these seep into the river in appreciable quantities, they could have downstream effects on water potability, aquatic life, and agricultural usability. Worse yet, these inputs may be difficult to detect in real time. By the time visible symptoms, such as fish die-offs or algal blooms begin to appear, the contamination may have already spread across hundreds of miles. Another overlooked aspect is how these geological disturbances could amplify the risks of flooding, not through the traditional threat of water overflow, but by undermining levee foundations. The Mississippi River is lined by one of the most extensive systems of levees in the world, structures built specifically to contain high water and prevent it from spilling into populated areas. These levees are only as strong as the ground they rest on. If fissures are migrating laterally beneath them, it could compromise their base integrity. A weakened base, combined with a high water event, such as spring snowmelt or hurricane runoff, could result in partial or full levee collapse, not because the water overtopped the barrier, but because the earth beneath it gave way. There is also increasing attention being paid to how these geological shifts might affect the thermodynamic properties of the river. Cracks in the bed can alter how heat is absorbed, stored, and transferred within the water column. This matters because water temperature directly influences oxygen levels, which in turn impacts the entire aquatic food chain. An increase in water temperature, even by a couple of degrees, could render certain areas inhospitable to cold water species such as sturgeon or walleye. On a broader ecological scale, temperature shifts can trigger mismatches in spawning cycles and food availability, leading to biodiversity disruptions that ripple across the ecosystem. The Mississippi River Delta, a critical region at the southern end of the river, is particularly vulnerable to upstream changes. It already suffers from subsidence, land loss, and saltwater intrusion due to sea level rise. If river flow patterns are altered upstream due to bed cracking, the timing and volume of fresh water reaching the delta could shift dramatically. This would accelerate coastal erosion, reduce sediment replenishment, and increase the incursion of saltwater into freshwater marshes, killing vegetation and further destabilizing coastal barriers. In this sense, a crack in the riverbed near Missouri might eventually contribute to the collapse of ecosystems hundreds of miles away in Louisiana. From the economic angle, the longer-term financial implications of these cracks extend well beyond shipping disruptions. Insurance markets could be severely impacted if assessments determine that river-adjacent properties are at higher geological risk. Farmlands might lose value if irrigation reliability is brought into question. Municipalities could face increased costs for water treatment if the river becomes chemically unstable due to subsurface mixing. These are slow-burning impacts, difficult to trace to a single cause, but their cumulative burden could rival that of any natural disaster in terms of economic fallout. Scientific institutions are also seeing this moment as a wake-up call for data modernization. Much of the monitoring infrastructure along the Mississippi was designed decades ago, when climate dynamics and computational modeling were in their infancy. Today's crisis demands real-time, multi-spectrum monitoring. Satellite altimetry, sonar mapping, subsurface radar, and AI-powered flow simulations. There's a push to deploy underwater drones capable of navigating the riverbed and photographing or mapping cracks in detail. These machines, outfitted with LiDAR and thermal sensors, can identify changes invisible to traditional tools, offering a fuller picture of the situation before it escalates. Even culturally, the implications of this event are significant. The Mississippi River is deeply embedded in American folklore, music, and identity. Mark Twain wrote of its meanders. Jazz and blues were born on its banks. Indigenous nations revered it as a sacred corridor. A threat to the Mississippi's stability strikes a symbolic chord as much as it does a practical one. Communities that have relied on it not just for livelihood but for heritage may face emotional and cultural dislocation if the river begins to behave unpredictably or threatens their homes. There is an underlying psychological impact to this crisis as well. For many, rivers symbolize permanence. Mountains may erode, but rivers are expected to flow, meander, and remain, predictable in their course, even if their volume fluctuates. The cracks shatter that sense of permanence. They expose the river not as a timeless fixture, but as a vulnerable, dynamic force shaped by invisible processes below. This realization can be deeply unsettling, especially in a time when climate instability already frays the sense of environmental security. The discovery of the cracks is also sparking debate among environmental policymakers. While emergency funding is being funneled into research and monitoring, some argue that this is a stopgap measure. What's needed, they say, is a fundamental rethink of how rivers are managed in the United States. For decades, the focus has been on control, confining rivers within engineered banks, building levees, dredging channels. But this philosophy assumes static ground beneath the flow. If that ground is shifting, the approach itself must evolve. Discussions are already emerging about river rewilding, letting the river reclaim some of its natural floodplains, or creating managed overflow zones to relieve pressure from critical segments. In this light, the cracks could be seen not only as a threat, but as an inflection point, a chance to reassess how infrastructure, agriculture, industry, and ecology intersect. Rather than racing to plug every fissure or reinforce every vulnerable structure, there may be wisdom in learning to adapt more flexibly. A dynamic river system requires a dynamic response, not rigid defenses, but living systems that absorb and adjust to change. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the cracks in the Mississippi riverbed? Predictions? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.